Christopher Nolan has once again returned to save post-COVID cinema attendance with his latest blockbuster, Oppenheimer, alongside Greta Gerwig's Barbie. His film depicts the events leading up to the creation of the atomic bomb by physicist Robert Oppenheimer and his peers during World War II, and handles one of Nolan's favorite topics, quantum physics, looking at how the subject developed during one of the most important moments in human history. Has Nolan outdone himself with this explosive biopic, or is the subject matter just too hot to handle? Before I get further into it, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and switching on notifications, as it really helps us out. When approaching Oppenheimer, it's crucial to get into the correct headspace. A lot of the criticisms I have seen are about what this film doesn't show. The indigenous population thrown out when Los Alamos was created, the nuclear fallout of the Trinity test, the harrowing consequence of the bombs on the Japanese population, and the dropping of them being left largely not criticized within the film. But this film is about Robert Oppenheimer. Nolan specifically wrote the majority of the script in first person, and clearly divides the film between that subjective view, shown in color, and the more objective view led by Strauss, which is shown in black and white, dubbed the fission and fusion sections respectively. This guides the audience to try and see the events of the film through Oppenheimer's eyes. In an interview with BBC One, lead actor Cillian Murphy reminisces about his time preparing for playing a physicist in a previous film, Sunshine.
But I hung out a lot with Brian Cox that time when we made Sunshine. And in fact, he took me to CERN in Geneva, and we met all the most brilliant people in the world. But what I was interested in was what all that knowledge and insight and theory does to your perspective and your view on the world.
Yes.
This approach echoes precisely what Nolan hoped to achieve with his Oppenheimer audience. The themes he interrogates in all of his films are overwhelming conversation starters, creating opportunities to discuss huge questions, ethical, moral, philosophical, existential even, especially with his other more hypothetical films like Inception and Tenet. So with Oppenheimer, we're left to question whether we'd make the bomb, whether we would be able to press the button that could potentially destroy our whole species, and whether the answer to these questions change depending on whether you knew the outcome or not. It's a paradox, one of Nolan's favorite things to present to an audience, and it's one that he's wrestled with for a long time, even referencing the Manhattan Project in his previous film, Tenet. As Nolan puts it in an interview with Brian Cox,
the most significant thread being the color, which is Oppenheimer's very subjective point of view. Really is an attempt to jump into his head, see the world the way he saw it, and wind up with understanding rather than judgment.
It's hard to imagine in retrospect the unknown that these scientists were facing, and like most scientists in history, they did as much research as they could on something that they had never seen before. This is the headspace that I'd recommend trying to occupy when watching Oppenheimer. In my opinion, Oppenheimer's subjective view is well presented, with a psychological precision that befits a scientific mind. He's only shown to really break down once, but there are many great moments where his imagination merges with reality, both before and after the detonation, imagining the effects of what he's creating, then reliving them while trying to move on with his life. However, the fission-fusion structure, I think, didn't help with the flow of this rather long film. Oppenheimer's subjective experience was interrupted quite abruptly by Strauss's objective view shown in black and white. It was an attempt to step back and allow the audience to judge Oppenheimer, but this shift definitely muddied the effect of the established subjective view. Furthermore, the aforementioned psychological precision had a negative effect on the dialogue, leaving it quite efficient in delivery and invariable in pace, a criticism I have of Nolan's writing in general. Every character is very matter-of-fact when speaking, something which suits the physicists but not everyone else and not in every situation. A lot of the emotional moments in Nolan's films are wordless, and in Oppenheimer's one significant breakdown, he's very quickly brought back to his stoic self. The dialogue reminds me of the Coen brothers, who have a similarly efficient way of presenting information, but with much more personality intertwined amongst the exposition. There's a lot of juxtaposition made between the fast talkers and slow thinkers within their films, showing there's a better way to be direct without losing a sense of character. With this in mind, the character of Oppenheimer matched Nolan's writing style perfectly, and Cillian Murphy did an absolutely phenomenal job with the role, aided by the star-studded cast. Truly, between this film and Barbie, we're seeing an incredible roster of absolutely fantastic acting across multiple generations. In a superb Fandango interview with the cast, Matt Damon speaks about how Nolan wanted them to support Cillian's performance.
You could see what he was trying to communicate to us and to his crew, like, this is what the movie's gonna be. And he said, what I need are actors in support of that. This entire thing is going on Cillian's back, and I need you guys to support that.
I think they absolutely succeeded in their task, with roles both big and small. I particularly enjoyed Josh Hartnett, who I recently watched in Guy Ritchie's Operation Fortune, where he absolutely brought to life what was otherwise quite a forgettable film. Benny Safdie was also very powerful, as well as Emily Blunt in their brief but memorable moments on screen. Kenneth Branagh was once again given an accent to play with, as he was in Tenet, which I found a tad comical, though maybe that's just me. The subject matter certainly lends itself to Nolan's obsession with having female characters that are eye-roll inducing damsels in distress, as Los Alamos was dominated by male physicists. I will commend his acknowledgement of physicist Lily Hornig and the detail of her being asked if she could type. There are a lot of examples of dialogue within this film that is taken from real-life accounts, and it adds a palpable authenticity to the events. Still, despite insisting repeatedly in interviews that both Kitty and Jean had an incredible impact on Oppenheimer's life, Nolan really only scratches the surface of these female characters. Florence Pugh felt like a piece of eye candy served up to appease the male gaze, and though I'm not saying that Nolan has to be brilliant at writing women, when compared to Greta Gerwig's men in Barbie, even with the layer of satire, it just seems like he's not even trying to make them whole characters. One of my favorite films of all time, and certainly my favorite Nolan film, is Inception, and that film had the freedom of events and characters that were not based on real life. And therefore, I wonder why it couldn't have a more diverse cast. But at the same time, I find it really difficult to picture those characters gender swapped, because I am so conditioned to seeing those roles of power occupied by men. If I'm not his target audience and he simply doesn't care, then fine, but that doesn't stop me from expecting more from such a high-profile director. It's just so nice to be able to relate to characters on that level, even if that doesn't quite apply to this film. Moving on to the visuals and sound, both of which are exceedingly spectacular, as is to be expected from Nolan and his long-term distance, low-commitment casual girlfriend, IMAX, which is a Barbie reference if you're confused. I've already mentioned the moments where Oppenheimer's imagination and reality merge, with Eisenstein-inspired montages like the opening, as well as frequent daydreaming sequences featuring waves, dust, stars, and other abstract formations.
By combining these images in different ways, we could give the audience a feeling of what it might be like for a physicist to visualize these things, and a thread that could run right the way through to the destruction of it.
This ties in nicely with Cillian Murphy's approach to playing a physicist, and Cox continues in the interview to commend Nolan for getting across that idea of there being a hidden power within nature that's both comprehensible and incomprehensible, once again playing on that idea of paradox. In terms of cinematography, there were a lot of intimate close-ups with very shallow focus, and these worked very well during Cillian's existential crisis-inducing stares into space, but did become problematic when he and other actors moved within these frames. This led to portions of dialogue where the actors' faces were completely out of focus, and it really confused me to see this, considering there were so many examples throughout the film of beautifully racked focus. Strauss, Truman, and Pash are just a few of the characters that I remember leaning forward to deliver a thematically important line, only to have it spoiled by the lack of focus, made doubly worse on the huge IMAX screen. And judging by the reviews that I've seen, I am not the only one to have noticed this. Apart from that, I enjoyed the cinematography, especially the sequence counting down to the Trinity test, which was also a profound moment for the musical crescendo, or should I say anti-crescendo, of the film. The sound design was incredibly powerful, and I particularly enjoyed the repeated motifs of that crackling radiation detector noise and the stomping feet. The score certainly gave an urgency to the film that was both exhilarating and tiring. I found myself yearning for a moment of peace and quiet, maybe a dialogue scene that was not accompanied by incessant violins. However, I can definitely appreciate how this was mimetic of Oppenheimer's journey. I was stressed to see the results of the Trinity test, where the explosion finally gave that moment of relief to the audience and to the characters before the inevitable dread and retrospective horror started to seep in. It is very clever filmmaking. What was less clever, and in typical Nolan fashion, was the dialogue that went missing because of the loudness of the score. It's not getting any less annoying as a feature of his films, and definitely affects the overall enjoyment, especially when we're trying to understand such complicated theories and with so many characters in play. Overall, Oppenheimer is a cinematic triumph of the biopic genre, bringing to life a critical moment in human history with ingenious technical achievements and a rip-roaring ensemble cast. Nolan understands how to make a spectacle. Thank you for watching. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe and switch on notifications so you don't miss future videos, and comment below with your thoughts on the film. And to complete Barbenheimer, my Barbie review is coming very soon and might already be out, so make sure to check the links in the description. For more film content, feel free to follow us on Letterboxd and TikTok. Otherwise, this has been Tea Break Film Reviews. My name's Michelle, and I hope you have a great day.